There is a plant that grows in poor soil, requires little water, and does not depend on chemical fertilizers. Yet it contains up to 8 times more magnesium than ordinary pasta. For centuries, it was eaten regularly across Europe, quietly, daily. Then it disappeared. While shelves filled with refined pasta made from highly bred wheat, uniform, cheap, predictable. Buckwheat did not vanish because it was weak. It vanished because strength was no longer measured the same way. Until the 19th century, buckwheat was a common food across Europe. Not rare, not regional. It appeared on tables in Eastern Europe, mountain regions, and monastic kitchens, especially where soil was thin and conditions were harsh. But agriculture began to change. Potatoes produced more calories per field. Wheat produced more uniform flour. Both scaled better. And slowly, food stopped being measured by what it gave the body and started being measured by what it gave the system. Buckwheat wasn't forgotten because it was less nourishing. It was replaced because quantity began to outweigh quality. Buckwheat is not wheat, and it is not a grain. Botanically, it belongs to an entirely different family, closer to wild plants than to cereal crops. Yet it behaves like a grain. It can be cooked, ground, baked, turned into noodles, and it does something few crops manage. It grows fast, on poor soil, with little demand. For centuries, that reliability mattered more than efficiency charts. What truly sets buckwheat apart is what it contains. Compared to refined wheat pasta, buckwheat can provide up to 8 times more magnesium, significantly higher levels of manganese and zinc, high-quality plant protein with a balanced amino acid profile. This is not marketing language, it is nutritional density. Buckwheat delivers more per bite, not more per hectare. And for a long time, that was enough. There's another difference rarely discussed. Modern wheat contains large amounts of highly bred gluten, not because humans demanded it, but because industrial baking did. This concentration of gluten is very different from what historical diets contained. For some people, this poses no issue. For others, it can place long-term strain on digestion and gut balance. Buckwheat contains no gluten at all, which makes it suitable not only for people with celiac disease, but also for those who simply tolerate wheat poorly. In this sense, buckwheat is not an alternative. It is a return. Buckwheat did not survive centuries by accident. It fed farmers, it fed monks, it fed communities during poor harvests. When wheat failed, buckwheat often did not. When soil was exhausted, buckwheat still grew. History tends to discard what doesn't work. Buckwheat endured. For centuries, it was cultivated at the margins, on hillsides, in rocky ground, in regions where other crops struggled to survive. It required little preparation, little intervention, and very little trust in perfect conditions. In medieval Europe, buckwheat was often planted as a safeguard, not instead of other crops, but alongside them. If the main harvest failed, buckwheat was already growing. Its short growing season made it reliable in unstable climates. Its tolerance for poor soil made it valuable where land had been overused. Monasteries cultivated it deliberately, not for profit, but for continuity. It was food that could be counted on, year after year, generation after generation. Buckwheat did not promise abundance, it promised survival. And in history, that promise mattered more than yield. As agriculture modernized, priorities hardened. Large monocultures replaced diverse fields. Machines demanded uniformity. Supply chains demanded predictability. Wheat fit perfectly. Buckwheat did not. It behaved differently in dough. It resisted standardization. It refused to become identical everywhere. In a system built on scale and profit margins, foods that prioritized nourishment over yield quietly disappeared. Not because they were inferior, but because they were inconvenient. Buckwheat does not fit easily into modern processing chains. Its outer hull is hard and tightly bound to the seed. Removing it requires additional steps, additional time, additional care. Once milled, buckwheat flour behaves differently from wheat flour. It does not form elastic dough. It cannot be handled by the same machines. It does not tolerate shortcuts. For industrial production, this creates friction. Modern food systems favor ingredients that move seamlessly from mill to factory, from factory to shelf. Buckwheat interrupts that flow. It demands careful handling, specialized processing, adjusted recipes. In a system optimized for speed and uniform output, such demands are rarely rewarded, not because the food lacks value, but because it resists being rushed. Today, agriculture faces a new problem: climate instability, droughts, heat waves, unpredictable rainfall. Modern monoculture systems are optimized for stability, but that stability is now eroding. Highly bred wheat requires ideal conditions: consistent water, consistent soil. Buckwheat does not. It tolerates poor soil, short seasons, dry conditions. In a warming world, resilience matters more than yield records, and buckwheat was built for resilience long before climate models existed. Long after buckwheat left everyday diets, science caught up. Researchers identified bioactive compounds like rutin, now associated with vascular support and antioxidant protection. Human studies link buckwheat consumption to improved cholesterol profiles, favorable metabolic markers, more stable post-meal responses. Nothing sensational, just consistent benefits that accumulate over time. The kind of effects traditional diets relied on long before laboratories existed. What modern research reveals is not complexity, but confirmation. Buckwheat supports cardiovascular health, metabolic balance, long-lasting satiety. These are not dramatic interventions. They are foundational ones. Buckwheat does not push the body. It supports it. On top, studies found that buckwheat helps stabilize blood sugar, supports brain and nerve function, and protects blood vessels. Effects that may contribute to reducing the risk of conditions such as type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and age-related cognitive decline. Today, food is abundant, but nourishment often is not. Calories are cheap, micronutrients are scarce. Buckwheat represents a different logic, not more, but denser, not louder, but deeper. This is particularly valuable in times when soils are becoming increasingly depleted and food contains fewer and fewer micronutrients. Buckwheat is slowly returning, in breads, in noodles, in whole grain meals. Not because it is fashionable, but because people are beginning to notice what modern efficiency left behind. They are rediscovering foods that give more than they take. Buckwheat was never outdated. It thrived on poor soil, nourished generations, and quietly delivered what bodies needed. Its disappearance was not a failure of nutrition. It was a shift in priorities. And as those priorities change again, some forgotten staples are finding their way back, not as trends, but as reminders. Reminders of a time when food was chosen for resilience, not convenience, when nourishment mattered more than speed, and reliability mattered more than volume. Buckwheat did not disappear because it failed. It disappeared because the world began to value different things. Now, as systems strain under their own efficiency, foods once considered inconvenient begin to look different. Not old, not primitive, but quietly prepared. Prepared for uncertainty, prepared for change. And perhaps that is why some foods survive history, even when history forgets them. In the end, health, flavor, and the honesty of our food cannot be replaced by modern systems built on nutrient-poor mass production. Efficiency can multiply calories, but it cannot reproduce nourishment, and some foods refuse to stay hidden forever. Buckwheat is one of them. Not because it is new, but because it continues to matter. And as long as this knowledge is remembered and quietly passed on, it cannot be erased again. If you want this kind of forgotten knowledge to survive, share it and stay close.